Welcome back, night wanderers, to Nakora Nights. Christmas is supposed to be warm lights, family, comfort, but out in the cold, silent winter nights, something else waits. Something older, hungrier, and drawn to the dark. Tonight, we're stepping into 10 true Christmas winter horror stories, real encounters from people who learned that winter doesn't always bring joy. Sometimes, it brings screams, footsteps circling a house in the snow, with no tracks leading away, a Christmas tree that moved rooms during the night, and a figure standing outside a frosted window, smiling, even though it wasn't breathing. These aren't tales told around the fire. These are stories people wish they could forget. Before we open the door to the cold, tell me, where are you watching from right now? And what time is it where you are? Because winter nights hit different after midnight. If you're brave enough to face the darkness of the holiday season, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment saying, "I'm watching in the cold." Now, pull your blanket tight, don't look toward the window, and whatever you hear in the snow, don't check it. This is 10 Untold, Most Disturbing True Christmas Winter Horror Stories. Let's begin. I always believed Christmas would bring softness into my life once I became a mother. I believed the season would glow again the way it had when I was a kid, when everything felt safe and bright. But adulthood never worked the way childhood memories promised. December usually came with heavy bills and even heavier worries, and every year I hoped things would feel different, but they rarely did. Back then, I lived in a small frozen town called Silver Pines, a place buried under deep snowbanks and long nights where houses stood far apart and the wind always seemed to whisper through the trees. My home was a tiny place at the end of a quiet road, a house my grandpa left me, the only thing in life I didn't owe money on. My name is Lila, and I was a single mother raising my 7-year-old son Rowan after his father vanished from our lives before Rowan's 3rd birthday. I worked in a veterinary clinic, cleaning cages, comforting scared animals, and earning just enough to cover food and heat. Life wasn't easy, but Rowan's smile kept me going. It was Christmas Eve when everything began. The morning started cold, the kind of cold that bites your cheeks and stiffens your fingers. I had just made cocoa for Rowan when I opened my front door to shake out the mat, and something unexpected sat on the porch. A tiny wrapped package, soft blue paper, tied with a thin silver ribbon. No card, no message, nothing. I picked it up carefully, thinking it must be from a neighbor, but when I walked inside and opened it, my stomach tightened. Inside was a small carved wooden fox that belonged on the shelf in my bedroom. I knew it instantly because the tail had a chip on the left side from when Rowan knocked it over last year. It had come from inside my house. I checked every window, every lock, every room, trying to convince myself maybe I moved it and forgot. But my hands shook the whole time because deep down I knew I had not. Someone had entered my home, touched my things, and then placed a gift on my porch like it was some sweet holiday gesture. I hid the fear from Rowan. I didn't want to ruin Christmas Eve, but something dark settled inside my chest, a warning I tried not to listen to. Later that afternoon, I took Rowan to the North Hill Mall, the biggest place nearby where families shopped, laughed, and took photos with Santa under the giant sparkling tree. Snowflakes drifted down as we walked in, and everything smelled like cinnamon and popcorn. I tried to relax, tried to pretend the morning gift was a mistake. Rowan pointed out a Santa ringing a bell by the far doors, not the official one in the photo booth. This Santa looked less polished, with a loose coat and a beard that didn't sit right against his chin. He waved at us in a slow, eerie motion. Rowan begged to say hello, so I walked with him, keeping my guard up even though I couldn't explain why. The man bent down to Rowan's height, asking him what he wanted for Christmas, praising his manners, smiling too wide at me. His eyes didn't match the cheerful grin on his mask-like face. They were sharp, dark, studying me in a way that made my skin crawl. He leaned a little too close when he talked, and his smile stretched too long when he complimented me. I stepped back, but he shifted forward like he was used to chasing comfort from people who didn't want to give it. Then Rowan tugged my arm, asking if we could leave, and I was grateful for the excuse. This should have been the end of it. But it was only the beginning. We returned home in the early evening. Snow covered the porch in a glittering sheet, untouched except for one thing. Another small gift sat neatly by the door, wrapped in the same blue paper. My heart hammered as I picked it up, and when I opened it inside, my breath caught. It was Rowan's missing glove. The one he lost 2 days ago inside our house. He didn't even know it was missing. I locked every door twice. I checked under the beds, inside the closets, even behind the shower curtain. Nothing. No sign of anyone. Just an empty house pretending to be peaceful. That night, after I tucked Rowan into bed, he fell asleep quickly. I stayed up watching a Christmas movie on low volume, trying to calm my spiraling thoughts. Outside, wind pushed snow across the windows in soft waves. The clock read 11:57 p.m. when I heard something faint, drifting through the cold. Children laughing. High, playful, distant. My chest tightened. Kids shouldn't be outside at midnight in weather like this. I walked to the window slowly, lifting the curtain only a little. Outside, the snow-covered street looked empty. No figures, no kids, no movement except drifting flakes. The laughter continued, though, echoing strangely, almost like it wrapped around the house. I grabbed my phone and opened the security camera app. I had set up cameras after a break-in years ago, small ones above the porch and near the living room window. The feed loaded, and what I saw made my blood run cold. It wasn't children. It was masked adults crouching low near the snowbank directly under my living room window. Their faces were covered with blank white holiday masks, smooth and emotionless, and they leaned close to the wall like they were listening to something inside. Their breaths fogged the air. One of them tilted their head slowly upward toward the camera like they knew exactly where it was. The childish laughter I heard wasn't real. It wasn't coming from kids. It was coming from them. I backed away from the window, shaking so hard my knees almost gave out. I called the police with trembling fingers, whispering every detail while locking myself and Rowan in my bedroom. They arrived 20 minutes later, but the masked group was gone by then, leaving only footprints circling the house. The next day was Christmas morning, but the joy felt thin. My nerves were stretched tight. I didn't let Rowan open presents until I walked around every part of the house again. Everything looked normal. Too normal, but something felt wrong. The tree. It stood silently in the corner, twinkling with warm lights, but something about it felt off. The branches looked slightly shifted compared to last night, like someone had touched them. I tried to brush it off. I blamed my lack of sleep. I blamed stress. But that night, while Rowan slept, I walked into the living room to get my phone charger and froze. The Christmas tree swayed, a soft, unnatural movement, like something inside it had breathed. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I didn't blink. I only watched. Slowly, branches bent inward and then outward again, like the whole tree revived itself for a moment. I backed away, heart beating painfully fast, and for the first time I noticed a tiny black dot deep between the branches, near the center of the tree. I stepped closer in a trembling motion and parted the ornaments. There was a hidden camera buried inside my Christmas tree. Someone had placed it there. Someone had been watching us, watching me, watching my child unwrap gifts, watching our nightly routine, watching every quiet moment we believed was private. My legs shook so violently I almost fell. I grabbed the tree base and pulled the whole thing down, ornaments scattering across the floor like shattered stars. The camera clattered out and rolled toward the couch. I stared at it, horrified, because that tiny device meant the intruder wasn't just coming to my house. He was already inside it. Every gift on the porch had come from inside. The glove, the wooden fox, even the missing pen I noticed today, the one I used last week. All these small things disappearing weren't accidents. Someone was entering the house without signs, slipping in and out like winter air. And the Santa at the mall, the smile, the stare, the strange comments, the way he leaned too close, his voice echoed in my head, strange and wrong. Later that evening, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, another package appeared outside. But this time, there was no ribbon. Just plain blue paper wrapped with shaky hands. Inside was a photo, a picture of me sleeping, taken inside my bedroom. The background showed my wall, my lamp, my blanket pulled high around my shoulders. Someone had been standing over me while I slept, someone who knew the layout of my home, someone who had touched my belongings, someone who sat outside my window wearing a cheerful costume for families to trust. I wanted to scream, but fear locked my voice inside my chest. I woke Rowan gently, gathered him in my arms, and told him we were leaving. We drove straight to my mother's house 30 miles away, not stopping once. I locked every door there, checked every window, and sat awake until sunrise. The police investigated, but they never found him. Not the masked group. Not the man in the red suit. Not the one who left the gifts. They said maybe it was a drifter who moved on, maybe a group passing through. Maybe someone who simply found a new target, but I knew better. He wasn't passing through, he had chosen us. And now, every Christmas Eve, when the snow grows thick and the air turns quiet, I check my porch before I open the door. Because some winter mornings, I still find small gifts wrapped in blue paper. A pencil I lost. A hair clip I thought I misplaced. A small object from Rowan's room. Little reminders that someone out there remembers us. That he might come back inside. I was 8. The winter my world cracked open. The winter Christmas stopped feeling warm and started feeling sharp. Back then, my family had just moved into a small town called Pine Hollow, a quiet, snowy place tucked far from highways where neighbors still waved from porches and dogs slept under Christmas lights without barking. My parents, Mila and Louis, bought an old stone house at the end of a narrow street because they said it felt peaceful, though to me it felt like a giant sleeping thing that woke up at night. My bedroom was bigger than any room I ever had before, big enough for my little TV, my piles of books, and my adventure toys that I never went anywhere without. My older sister Layla was 10, always bossy, always acting like she had lived 10 more lives than me. She and I both loved Christmas so much we counted down every day with a paper chain taped to the hallway wall, tearing one loop each morning like opening a tiny prize. But the house always felt too quiet after dark, the kind of quiet that makes you think someone is standing behind you. Pine Hollow felt safe during the day, families building snowmen and drinking hot chocolate by windows, but at night, the snow made the world silent in a way that felt wrong. No dogs barking, no cars, just cold air pressing on the walls. That year, everything changed. I remember it clearly, because it was the first time I realized grown-ups were not strong enough to stop everything bad. And it all started on Christmas Eve, a night meant to sparkle, not break. I had stayed awake again, too excited to sleep. My mom always warned me that if I didn't sleep, gifts would be delayed, but I never listened. That night, I played an old adventure game on my chunky TV, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like warm soap. The glow of the screen lit my room in a soft way that made me feel safe. The time was around 1:10 a.m., or as my mind remembers it, 1:10 in the bones of the night. When I finally paused the game, my bladder forced me to do something I hated, walk into the cold hallway. The second I opened my door, the air bit my skin, so freezing I could almost see my breath. The winter in Pine Hollow had been the coldest in 40 years, people said, and it always felt like the cold came inside to look around. I tiptoed toward the bathroom, doing everything slowly because my mom had a talent for hearing even the softest sound whenever I was awake past bedtime. Everything seemed normal, dark, calm. I had no idea I was walking straight toward the moment that would haunt the rest of my life. When I finished washing my hands, I cracked the bathroom door open, and that was when I heard it. A soft rustling, like someone shifting branches on a Christmas tree. At first, something bright and impossible flickered in my head. Santa. A silly thought, but the kind every kid tastes at least once. The rustling came again, then a faint shuffle. Curiosity tugged me forward, almost against my will. I padded halfway down the stairs, gripping the railing with my small fingers. A strong pine smell drifted up from the living room, like the tree had moved closer somehow. Then I saw it. A moving glow, not the warm, colorful Christmas lights, but the piercing beam of a flashlight sliding across the carpet. My heart thudded hard enough to shake my ribs. I leaned forward, peeking just enough to see legs behind the tree. Real legs, not boots from a costume. Next to them sat a black bag wide open, filled with shapes I couldn't identify. Then the figure stood. He was not Santa, not anyone friendly. A pale man with messy stubble, wearing a thick forest green jacket and old jeans, gloves that looked cheap and worn. His hair stuck out from under a dark beanie. His eyes were small and restless. He looked right at me with an expression that still chills me, even as an adult. He saw me, and then he lifted one gloved finger to his lips, whispering in a voice too soft to be real, "Shh, Santa's busy." My body froze. Every sound rushed out of the world. He stepped a little to the side, and I realized his bag was filled with our ornaments, small wrapped presents, and our glass snow angel that belonged to my grandmother. He had taken everything he could reach. My throat clamped shut, but my instinct broke it open. "Mom. Dad." I screamed so loudly I startled myself. The man jerked backward, shocked. His flashlight shook. He grabbed the black bag, then hesitated, like he was deciding whether he needed to silence me. That hesitation made something old and cold crawl into me, something I still feel when I walk alone at night. Then he dropped the bag and sprinted toward the front door. The door burst open, letting winter rush in. He vanished into the darkness. Snow swirled inside like tiny frozen ghosts. My legs almost gave out. I stumbled backward until I hit the wall, my whole body shaking. My mom raced down the stairs first, her hair wild, her voice trembling. "What happened?" "What happened?" I pointed at the open door, crying so hard I could barely speak. There was a man. He was inside. He was behind the tree. My dad burst past us wearing only pajama pants and thick socks, yelling, "Where? Where is he?" He flew outside into the blizzard. My mom begged him to come back, but he didn't listen. Police showed up minutes later, 2 officers crunching through the snow with their heavy boots. Their breath puffed like smoke as they stepped inside. Officer Grant knelt to look at me, his eyes soft. "You did the right thing yelling, kiddo. You're safe now." But I didn't feel safe, not with ornaments scattered across the floor like broken memories. Not with the cold wind pushing into the cracks. Not with the thought that a stranger had stood in front of our tree in the middle of the night, watching our house like he lived there. My dad eventually came back in, sweating even though the cold outside could freeze water in seconds. "I almost caught him," he muttered. I swear I was right behind him. My mom wrapped a blanket around me, but even then I couldn't stop shaking. "Did he say anything to you?" she whispered. I nodded. "He said he was Santa." Layla peeked out from behind the couch, trembling. "Mom, I saw footprints outside the window." Officer Grant exchanged a look with his partner. They had the tired faces of people who already knew bad news. "We've already had 2 break-ins tonight," he said softly. "Same pattern." Back door forced open with a tool, probably a crowbar. My dad's fist clenched so hard his knuckles turned white. The other officer lifted the dropped bag. "Half these ornaments look like family keepsakes. People like this don't care what they ruin." The idea of a stranger touching our memories made me feel sick, like he had taken pieces of us that we couldn't get back. The days after were blurry. Fear mixes memories together like paint. I remember my mom putting bells on all the windows. I remember my dad checking every corner of the house with a flashlight every night. I remember waking up from dreams where that man stood behind the tree again, whispering that same awful line. "Santa's busy." Years later, when I was older, I finally asked my mom about that night. Her face lost every color of comfort. She sat down at the kitchen table, folding her hands like she was holding something fragile. "You don't remember the worst part," she said. "What part?" She looked down. "He didn't run right away when he saw you." He paused, like he was deciding if he needed to stop you from screaming. My stomach hollowed out. My dad spoke quietly from the doorway, and when I chased him, I found him hiding behind our neighbor's shed. If I'd been a few seconds slower, I don't know what he would have done. That was when I learned the truth. The police later found footprints circling our house not once but 3 times. Our neighbor's security light had clicked on earlier that night. Another family across town reported seeing a man at their window while taking Christmas market pictures. In each photo they looked at later, a man in a Santa coat stood somewhere behind them, blurry but watching. People got sick too. Someone at the Christmas market handed out free cookies with no ingredients listed, and half the people who ate them threw up so violently doctors had to give them fluids. Some said a tall man in a Santa jacket had passed the cookies around, and another story floated through town, one that made my skin crawl. A mall Santa had a child sit on his lap whispering facts about his life no stranger should ever know, things about his home, his routines, even how he looked without the fake beard. Every story pointed to someone slipping through Pine Hollow like a shadow that loved Christmas for all the wrong reasons. And the worst part? He was never caught. I check every door and window before bed, sometimes twice, sometimes more, because I know what it's like to feel a stranger's eyes on you in the dark. My wife laughs and calls me overly careful, but she wasn't there the night I saw that man standing behind our tree, pretending to be something harmless. Even now, when wind shakes the trees outside our house, a part of me is 8 again. I feel the same cold fear in my chest. I hear that same whisper hiding in the dark corners of memory. Shh, Santa's busy. And every Christmas when we decorate our tree, I see the missing spots. Decorations we never found, memories we couldn't replace. I see a black bag hitting the floor. I see a stranger looking at me like I was a problem he needed to solve. And I wonder if, somewhere in the snow, he still walks from house to house, watching families through their windows, waiting for a moment where the world feels too quiet. Waiting for a child to wake up at the wrong time. Waiting for Christmas Eve. Because the truth is simple. Some lights outside our house never belonged to decorations. Some shadows weren't shadows. Some rustling wasn't the tree settling. And some Santas aren't wearing costumes. They're wearing intentions. Bad ones. I always believed winters kept the evil away, that the cold pinned bad things under the ice, that snow softened every sound except the ones worth hearing. That was before I learned how wrong a person can be about the place they trust the most. My name is Milan Crest, and this is the Christmas I stopped believing safe towns exist. I moved with my fiancée Leela to a tiny winter village called North Glen Reach, a place that looked painted, not built. Every December, people wrapped their porches in ribbons, children pulled sleds across glowing streets, and the air always smelled like cinnamon drifting out of someone's open kitchen window. When we bought our little 2-story home on Frostline Street, we pictured kids running in the yard, warm weekends grilling, and maybe a maple tree we would watch grow year by year. But that was before I met the man living 3 steps from us, the man everyone called normal, the man I thought I understood. His real name was Corbin Vale, and even now my hands shake writing it. Before I tell you the night everything broke apart, you need to understand who Corbin pretended to be. He looked like someone permanently late for a meeting. Brown hair combed with too much care, clothes always neat, smile always thin. He jogged every sunrise, drove a forgettable gray car, and kept his lawn in perfect lines. People described him with boring words, quiet, polite, harmless. But I never forgot the first strange moment. One night, I spotted him behind our houses near the frozen creek, standing so still he looked carved out of the dark. His hands rested in his pockets, and he stared at the black ice like something under it was staring back. Another time, I heard what sounded like a heated argument coming from inside his house, voices overlapping. But the moment I stepped closer, everything stopped, the whole place going silent as I held breath. I shrugged it off. Everyone has weird days. Everyone says things they don't want heard. I kept living like nothing was wrong. Until that December. It was the second week, and nearly every house glittered with Christmas decorations. Lila covered our porch with warm white lights, her favorite tradition, while I pretended to help, usually staring at the gutter pretending to troubleshoot a bulb. That night, at about 7:45 p.m., as I fought a knot of lights, I noticed something strange. Corbin's house outline began flickering. Not twinkling, not fading, but twitching, like someone was shaking the bulbs from the inside. The pulses came sharp and uneven, fast, then slow, then frozen, then fast again, as if the lights were trying to break free. I muttered under my breath. "What is that?" Lila stepped out onto the porch in her coat and slippers. "Did you break something again?" "No, look at his house." She squinted. "That's strange. Did it do that last year?" "Not like this." Then just as quickly as it began, the lights froze still. Bad wiring, she guessed, walking back inside. But the timing felt deliberate, almost like a message. I brushed it off until dawn. At 6:22 a.m., when I left for work, I noticed Corbin's car hadn't moved for days. Frost coated the windows, untouched. Every blind in the house was shut tight, pulled down so far I couldn't even see a shadow. When I returned at 5:15 p.m., the blinds were still sealed. The lights were on, but the house looked lifeless. His place gave off a feeling now, something wrong humming under the snow. That night, the flickering returned. Lila stepped outside, her voice shaking. "Rutherford, look," his lights again. This time the pattern looked too intentional. Short bursts. Long bursts. Vast clusters. Like someone banging a message in the dark. Morse code maybe, or someone trying to yell with electricity. "Should we talk to him?" she asked. "Yeah, maybe." I crossed the icy yard, each step crunching. The air smelled of chimney smoke and winter pine, the kind of smell that should feel comforting, but my stomach twisted with unease. The flickering stopped the moment I reached his porch, as if the house sensed me. I knocked. Silence. I rang the bell. Nothing. Then a click, and the door cracked open. Corbin stared out. His face looked wrong. Pale, eyes sunken. Hair messy like he hadn't slept or showered in days. His lips twitched when he tried to smile. "Hey, sorry to bother you," I said. "Your lights outside are acting strange." "They are." His voice sounded like sand scraping metal. "Yeah. 2 nights now." I hesitated. "Haven't seen you around lately. Everything all right?" "Under the weather," he whispered. Something in his eyes flickered in a way the lights never could. Then behind him, faint and distant, I heard it. A scream. A child's scream. Not playful, not fussy. A raw cry begging for help. "Help me. Please, someone help me." My blood froze. Corbin flinched, only slightly, but enough for me to know he heard it too. He closed the door sharply. "Good night." The lock clicked. I stood frozen, breath clouding the air. Corbin didn't have kids. He never had guests. He lived alone. I sprinted back across the snow, nearly slipping on the porch steps. Lila jumped up when she saw my face. "What happened? You look like you saw. Call the police." "Now, why? Rutherford, what? There's a kid in that house." A kid screaming for help, her face drained white. She grabbed her phone with shaking fingers, but I dialed faster. The operator picked up. 911, what's your emergency? There's a child screaming inside my neighbor's house. He lives alone. The kid sounded terrified. Please hurry. 2 cruisers arrived within minutes, sirens silent but lights flashing across the snow like blue fire. Lila and I watched from the window, gripping each other's hands. The officers knocked. No answer. They knocked harder. Still nothing. Then they forced the door open, shouting commands into the dark. Silence, then running. A thud. Another shout. Minutes passed like hours until an officer stepped outside, speaking into his radio. We found the child. Lila gasped and covered her mouth, tears streaming instantly. Another officer guided a small boy out into the cold. He wore no shoes, feet purple from the chill, his face streaked with tears and dust. He whispered, "Thank you," again and again, voice breaking. They wrapped him in a blanket and rushed him into the ambulance. Then they dragged Corbin out, hands cuffed, eyes wild. He fought the officers, shouting something over and over. He was safe with me. He was safe. 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 That word sent a sick jolt through my chest. The truth that followed made everything worse. The boy's name was Milo. He had gone missing from a town many miles away. His family had been searching for days. He had been taken, hidden, kept in Corbin's basement, and those flickering lights weren't malfunctions at all. A fuse panel sat in the basement behind a blocked window. Milo figured out that if he hit certain switches, the exterior lights would glitch, hoping someone outside would notice. He had been waiting for footsteps, waiting for a voice, waiting for anyone to come close enough to see his message. And he saw me through the tiny crack in the window. The moment I stepped onto the porch, that was when he screamed. If we hadn't checked the lights again that night, if I hadn't knocked, if I hadn't paused long enough to listen, I don't know what would have happened. Life in North Glen Reach didn't go back to normal, not really. The snow still fell, the lights still glowed, but now every house seemed to hide something. Lila double-checked our locks every night. I lay awake listening for flickers. And then the strange thing started happening to us. It began with a Christmas card left on our porch. No return address, no signature except one word. Your friend. Inside the card, someone wrote memories of childhood moments that never happened, places I had never been, games I had never played. But every detail about my current life was exact, my routine, the time I left for work, the nights Lila baked late, the hours she went jogging every morning. Every detail correct except the past. Then a charity Santa came knocking. He wore an old-style red coat and held a donation bucket marked Winter Hearts Foundation. His voice was soft and too calm. We donated $5. Later, neighbors learned no such charity existed. Then our own Christmas lights started changing patterns at night. Letters, words. Not random. Run, leave. He's back. Then not alone. We thought it was a prank until one night at 2:17 a.m., every bulb lit at once in a burst so bright it washed the bedroom in white. Lila grabbed my arm. Rutherford. Someone is in the yard. A figure stood by the maple tree, its outline unmoving, snow piling on its shoulders. When I stepped toward the window, it tilted its head slowly, almost curiously, before stepping backward into the shadows. We didn't see its face. The next morning, fresh footprints circled our house twice. They weren't from boots. They were bare feet. Milo's card is still tucked in my drawer, the one with the scribbled thank you. I look at it sometimes when the lights flicker, reminding myself that courage can hide in small places. But then I remember Corbin's face the night he opened the door, the calm that didn't belong on a human, the shadow behind his eyes. I remember the way he said safe like the word meant something else. The town says he's gone now, locked away, but winter has a way of keeping secrets alive under the snow. And lately the nights feel like something is waiting again, some cold presence pacing just outside the glow of the porch lights. Because the truth I learned, that December never left me. You never truly know the people living only steps away. Not their secrets, not their shadows, not the monsters they hide. And sometimes the only warning you get is a flicker in the dark. I grew up believing Christmas was the safest time of year. Something about the way lights softened every corner, how carols drifted through cold air, how even the loneliest streets felt a little less empty. When I was young, Christmas meant our house bursting at the seams with family, voices layering over each other, laughter spilling from one room into the next, someone always cooking, someone always arguing about something that didn't matter. It was loud and messy and warm. But the Christmas everything changed. I learned what real silence sounds like. That was the year my mother's older brother, Uncle Vincent, came back after vanishing from our lives for nearly 8 months, and nothing felt safe again. Uncle Vincent was the one who made holidays feel magical when I was growing up. He had this laugh that rolled through the whole house, the kind you could hear from the driveway before he even knocked. He'd show up with strange gifts, odd snacks from gas stations, random trinkets he found at thrift stores. No wife, no kids, no real career to speak of. But he was the fun uncle, the one who made you feel like the world wasn't so heavy. He'd ruffle my hair and say, "Kiddo, life's already hard enough. Somebody's got to keep it light." He always smelled like pine needles and spearmint gum. Then that summer, everything fell apart. A semi-truck clipped his sedan on a highway overpass. He survived, but barely. My mother said he had severe neurological damage, which was her way of saying he wasn't himself anymore. We didn't see him after he got out of the hospital, not until Christmas. When Mom told us he was coming to stay with us for the holidays, the house buzzed with nervous energy. I was 14 that year, old enough to feel the tension in the air, but too young to understand what it really meant. My father didn't look happy about it. He muttered under his breath, he shouldn't be driving. Hell, he shouldn't be alone. Mom snapped back, he's my brother Mark. He has nobody else. When Vincent finally arrived, everything about him felt off. Not dangerous exactly, not threatening, just wrong. He stood too still in the doorway. No wide grin, no booming hello, just a soft, almost robotic, "Hey kiddo." He hugged me, but his arms hesitated halfway through, like he had to remember how to do it. At dinner that night, everyone talked and laughed around him while he stared at his plate, zoning out toward the pine garland draped over the fireplace. Then something happened that made my stomach twist. My little cousin grabbed one of those Christmas poppers, the kind that makes a tiny snap when you pull it. Just a harmless little crack. But Vincent screamed, not like someone startled, like someone dying. His chair flew backward. His hands shot up to cover his ears. His whole body shook as he shouted, "No, no, stop, stop, stop." The entire room froze. Dad stammered, "Jesus, Vincent, it was just..." Mom cut him off sharply, "You're okay. You're safe. You're safe here. You're safe here." Vincent's breathing slowed, but his eyes stayed wide and glassy, like he was still seeing something none of us could. Then, just like that, his face went blank again. Empty, silent. When he said he was heading back to his motel later that night, Mom insisted he stay. Dad pulled her into the kitchen and I heard him hiss, "He's not stable. What if he wanders? What if he hurts himself?" Mom's voice came back cold and firm. "He's my brother. I'm not leaving him alone in some motel room on Christmas." Dad didn't argue after that. Vincent got the spare room down the hall from mine. Mom tucked me into bed that night and said, "He's just struggling right now. If you hear anything tonight, it's probably just him pacing or something. Don't worry." But I did worry. God, I wish I could forget what happened next. Sometime after midnight, I woke up. Not from a nightmare. Not from a sound. It felt like something yanked me awake, like my body sensed danger before my brain caught up. The house was pitch black, except for a thin slice of streetlight cutting through the blinds. I could hear Dad's soft snoring from down the hall. And then I heard something else. Breathing. Not snoring, not sleep mumbling. Actual breathing. Slow. Wet, uneven. Right outside my door in the hallway. At first, I tried to convince myself it was Dad going to the bathroom. But the breathing never moved. It just stayed there, lingering in the center of the hall right outside the spare room. I whispered, "Mom." No answer. The breathing continued, one shaky inhale, one rattling exhale, a faint rasp like something caught in the throat. I pulled my blanket up to my chin and listened. 5 minutes. 10, 15. I wanted to call for my parents, but at 14 years old, courage doesn't come easy. I froze. I stared at my doorway until my eyes burned, then footsteps. Not soft ones, fast ones. Desperate ones. Whoever was in the hall bolted down the stairs. The back door slammed so hard the whole house shook. Mom was awake instantly. Dad too. Mom burst into my room first. "Are you okay? Did someone come in here? Did he come in your room?" Dad appeared behind her, pale as a sheet. He said quietly, "He's not in the spare room." Mom's face drained of color. I stayed in my bed while they searched outside with flashlights. Our dog barked nonstop from the yard. For hours, I listened to muffled voices, the crunch of boots on frozen grass, the creak of the old shed door. They found him around 4:30 in the morning. Dad came into my room looking like he'd aged 10 years. He sat on the edge of my bed and whispered, "Vincent. We found him. He's gone, kiddo." I remember asking, "Gone where?" Because at that age, gone still meant missing. Dad swallowed hard. He didn't say anything else. I didn't learn the truth until I was 23. Dad was dying. liver failure. He told me everything during a quiet moment at the hospital in Edmonton. He said he found Vincent at the bottom of a steep ravine behind our property, an area we were never allowed to play near because of how jagged and narrow the rocks were. Vincent wasn't just lying there. He was wedged between two stone slabs, back bent at an impossible angle, head stuck deep in the crevice, feet pointing straight up toward the sky like someone had dropped him upside down into a crack in the earth. Dad's voice shook when he said, "I've seen falls. Hunting accidents, stupid mistakes. Your uncle didn't fall into that gap. It was too tight. Too precise." I whispered, "Are you saying someone put him there?" He shook his head slowly. "I don't know what I'm saying. I just know damn well he didn't trip into that spot by accident in the dark, not in that exact way." Then he looked at me, really looked at me, really looked at me. "And that breathing you heard that night, I heard it too after I woke up." It wasn't Vincent. My chest went cold. Then who was it? Dad cut me off. "Don't go looking for answers, kiddo. Some things aren't meant to make sense." He died 2 weeks later. I'm older now, 31. I live alone in a small apartment in Vancouver, far from that house, far from those memories. Different city, different life. But every December, I think about Vincent. And sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I hear it again, that same breathing. Slow, raspy. Like something trying to remember how lungs work, except now it's not coming from the hallway. It's right outside my bedroom door. And when I listen closely, when I let myself hear past the fear, it doesn't sound like Vincent at all. It sounds like something that never learned how to breathe in the first place. Last Christmas, things got worse. I was living in a small rental house on the edge of Vancouver, the kind of place with creaky floors and thin walls. I told myself I was fine being alone for the holidays. My girlfriend had left me in October. My job as a logistics coordinator kept me busy enough to avoid thinking too much. I decorated anyway, a small tree in the corner. Stockings hung over the fake fireplace even though nobody else was coming. It felt pathetic, but I did it anyway because not decorating felt worse. On Christmas Eve, I came home late from a company dinner. The house was dark except for the tree lights blinking in the living room. I kicked off my boots, tossed my coat on the chair, and headed upstairs. That's when I noticed something strange. The stockings I'd hung that morning were heavier, not like I'd imagined it. Actually heavier. I lifted the first one and something solid shifted inside. I reached in and pulled out my car keys, the ones I'd left on my kitchen counter that morning. My stomach dropped. I checked the second stocking. Inside was my wallet, the one I'd left on my bedroom dresser. I stood there frozen, staring at these objects that should not have been in these stockings. Someone had been in my house. Someone had gone into my bedroom. Someone had touched my things. I checked every lock, every window. Everything was sealed tight, no broken glass. No scratches on the doors, nothing. The next morning, Christmas Day, I woke up to find the stockings heavier again. This time I found my toothbrush inside one, my deodorant in the other, items from my bathroom, items I'd used just hours before. My hands shook as I pulled them out. I called the police. They came, looked around, found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints. One officer suggested maybe I'd been sleepwalking. I wanted to believe that. I really did, but I knew I hadn't put those things there. I knew. That night, I stayed awake. I sat in my living room with all the lights on, staring at the stockings. At 2:17 a.m., I heard it. Footsteps upstairs, slow, deliberate, moving through my bedroom. I grabbed a kitchen knife and crept up the stairs. The hallway was empty. My bedroom door was open. I stepped inside. Nothing, no one. But my closet door was open. I always kept it closed. Always. I walked over and looked inside. Sitting on the floor of my closet was a Santa hat. I don't own a Santa hat. I've never owned a Santa hat. I backed out of the room and locked myself in the bathroom until sunrise. The next night, I tried to leave. I packed a bag and headed for my car. But when I opened the front door, I stopped cold. Every piece of furniture in my living room had been moved. The couch was facing the wrong direction. The coffee table was against the wall. The tree was in the center of the room. I'd been home all day. I hadn't moved anything. I would have heard something. I would have noticed, but I didn't. I slammed the door shut and called my friend Derek. He came over and stayed with me. We moved the furniture back together. He kept saying, "Maybe you're stressed, man. Maybe you moved it and forgot." But I saw the look in his eyes. He didn't believe that either. At 3:42 a.m., Derek woke me up. He was standing in the doorway of the guest room, pale and shaking. He whispered, "Someone's downstairs." I heard them moving furniture again. We crept downstairs together. The living room was rearranged again, different than before. The couch was turned upside down. The tree was lying on its side. The stockings were on the floor, and in the center of the room, written in what looked like soot or ash on the hardwood floor, were two words: "You're next." Derek left that night. He said he couldn't stay. He said I needed to get out of that house. He was right, but I didn't leave. I don't know why. Maybe I was too stubborn. Maybe I was too scared. Maybe some part of me needed to know what was happening. On the third night, I heard music, faint at first. A Christmas carol, Deck the Halls. It was coming from the basement. I don't have a speaker system in the basement. I don't have anything electronic down there except the water heater. I stood at the top of the basement stairs, listening. The music got louder. I grabbed a flashlight and descended slowly. The basement was freezing. My breath came out in clouds. The music was clearer now. It wasn't coming from a speaker. It was coming from something else. Someone else. I turned the corner and saw him, a man in a red suit. A Santa suit, standing in the corner of my basement. His back was to me, his shoulders hunched. His head tilted at an unnatural angle. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just stood there, frozen, staring at this thing pretending to be Santa Claus. Then he turned around, and I saw his face. Or what was left of it. It wasn't a face anymore. It was a hollow space, a black void where eyes and a mouth should have been. The music stopped. The air went silent. And then he smiled. Not with lips, with something else. Something wrong. He took a step toward me. I ran. I bolted up those stairs faster than I'd ever moved in my life. I slammed the basement door and shoved a chair under the handle. I could hear him on the other side. Scratching, breathing, waiting. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep for 3 nights after that. I moved out of the house the following week. I left everything behind. The furniture, the decorations, the stockings. I didn't care. I just had to leave. I'm staying with a friend now, but every night I hear it. That breathing, that slow, wet, uneven breathing. It's not in the walls. It's not on the floor. It's right next to me, wherever I go. And sometimes, late at night, I hear the music again. Deck the Halls. Faint, distant, getting closer. I don't celebrate Christmas anymore. I don't hang stockings. I don't put up trees. Because I know now what my father knew, what Vincent knew. Some things aren't meant to make sense. Some things just are. And whatever that thing was in my basement, whatever that thing is that breathes in the dark, it's still here. It never left. It's just waiting for the next Christmas, waiting for the next person who thinks they're safe, waiting for me. Sometimes the silence is so heavy I can hear the house shift, the walls settle, the wind scratch against the siding, and in that silence I wait, terrified it will move, more terrified it won't. I never expected winter to feel so loud. People always say a new home feels magical during December, like the world softens under snow and every window glows with wonder. But for me, that first winter felt like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something I didn't understand. I moved into that small house on Lantern Ridge after my grandmother passed, a quiet, single-floor place in a sleepy Colorado town where the streets curved like old stories and pine trees leaned over rooftops as if listening. My name is Jasper, and back then I was 24, working evenings at a local print shop, barely making enough to repaint the house the way Gran always wanted. I'd grown up visiting every summer, chasing fireflies in her backyard, never realizing the house would someday become mine. I used to love its creaks and murmurs, but that winter they felt heavier, almost intentional. My girlfriend Mira lived across town with her cousins, and she came over most weekends. We had been together almost a year, talking quietly about maybe getting a place together someday. Not soon, but someday, like a dream we kept tucked in our pockets. It was Friday, deep December, the kind where the wind carved icy lines across the porch and the streetlights flickered whenever the snow thickened. I woke every night around 2:20 a.m., not scared, just aware, like a quiet alarm inside me kept going off. I'd sit up, listen to the house breathing, then lie back down, telling myself it was stress or the lonely silence of winter. That evening, Mira texted that she'd be coming over after work. She always brought snacks, and she always wore those oversized winter sweaters that made her look like a walking Christmas decoration. When she arrived, shaking snow from her hair, she held up a bag of cocoa packets and cookies. "Your house feels festive," she said, her breath fogging as she stepped inside. "But your neighbor creeps me out. His Santa inflatable looks like it's staring at people. Old Mr. Vance," I said. "He forgets to fill it all the way, so it slumps forward like it's spying." "Well, it gave me chills," she muttered. Inside, the living room was warm, lit by the fake tree Gran had kept for decades, its lights mismatched but somehow perfect. The rest of the house was half finished, walls chipped, bathroom tiles cracked, and in the hallway near the kitchen sat a narrow wooden hatch that led to the crawl space. It never closed properly unless you lifted and pushed at the same time, a trick only Gran seemed to master. When I was a kid, I hated that hatch. It felt like a doorway to somewhere too dark and too close. Funny how childhood fears come alive again when you're grown. We settled onto the couch, watching an old Christmas comedy while sharing chocolate-covered pretzels. Mira stretched her legs across mine, leaning her head on my shoulder, reminding me that normal moments were still possible, even in a house that whispered too much at night. Halfway through the movie, she said, "We should get wine." Christmas needs wine, not beer. So that meant I had to walk to Frost Pine Liquor 2 blocks down. "I'll go," I said, grabbing my coat. "Want anything else?" "Surprise me," she said with a grin. I kissed her cheek and stepped out into the sharp night air. Frost drifted from rooftops, and the quiet was thick enough to feel. Snow buzzed beneath my boots, and for a moment I wished December felt lighter, the way it was supposed to. Inside the liquor shop, the bell chimed twice above me. The place smelled like cardboard and cinnamon, narrow aisles filled with dusty bottles. The owner, Mr. Hayes, greeted me with a tired smile. "Little late to be out," he said. "Just grabbing wine," I replied. "My girlfriend says Christmas demands it." He chuckled, ringing me up while rambling about hockey games I didn't follow. My phone buzzed. Mira calling. "One sec," I told him, stepping aside. "Hey, you okay?" I asked. Her voice was whisper thin, strained. "Can you stay on the phone? I keep hearing something." "Hearing what? Something under the floor?" "Like movement. Probably the house settling," I said, though the words felt weak. "No, it sounds like shuffling." Mira never imagined things. She was the logical one, the grounded one. "Stay with me," I said. "I'm leaving now." As I walked home, her breathing filled the phone, uneven and tight. The street was dead silent except for Christmas lights blinking on porches. Snow drifted off rooftops. A cold worry twisted in my stomach. "You hear anything now?" I asked. "Just little sounds," she whispered. "Maybe I'm overthinking. I just hate that crawl space door." "I'll check it when I get home." "Could an animal get in?" she asked. "No opening from outside," I said, though even as I said it, the cold tightened around my ribs. When I reached my house, Mira whispered, "Tell me when you're inside. I can see the porch light." "I'm here," I said, unlocking the door. She rushed to me, hugging me tight, her hands trembling. "I probably scared myself," she whispered. "You're okay," I said softly. "I'm here now." We poured wine, turned on another movie, and the tension faded until everything felt normal again. Then came the sound, a deep thud beneath the floor. Not wood settling, not pipes. A heavy, slow, intentional thud. I froze. Mira's eyes widened with panic. "You heard that, right? Right?" she whispered. "Yeah." Another thud. Then something like fabric brushing across boards. My heart slammed inside me. "Okay," I said, standing carefully. "Maybe something got in. Don't go down there," she whispered, grabbing my sleeve. "I just want a quick look." I grabbed my flashlight, approached the crawl space hatch, and pushed it open. A rush of cold, damp air hit me, thick with a smell like sour urine. "What is that?" I muttered. "Don't go," Mira said again, trembling. "I'll be fast." I climbed down the wooden steps, the cold deepening. Dust hung low in the light. Boxes lined the walls, old decorations, tools, blankets. I scanned left, nothing. Scanned right, then I saw it. A blanket in the corner behind the storage bins, crumpled and dirty. Not ours. Then something shifted, soft, slow, unmistakable. I stumbled backward, rushing up the stairs, slamming the hatch shut and twisting the lock. "What did you see?" Mira asked, voice shaking. "Nothing. Probably an animal, but my uncle can check tomorrow." But she knew I was lying. We tried to finish the movie, sipping wine, pretending everything was fine, but neither of us stopped glancing toward the hallway. Eventually, we went to bed, leaving the TV on for comfort. I fell asleep around 3 a.m., Mira beside me, the room dim and warm. Hours later, I woke with a sharp headache and an urge to use the bathroom. The TV flickered softly. Mira slept curled under the blanket. The hallway beyond the door was pitch black. I opened it gently and stepped out. Then I froze. At the far end of the hallway stood a silhouette, tall, perfectly still, facing me. My breath left my body. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I slowly closed the door and locked it, my hands shaking violently. Mira stirred. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "Someone is inside," I breathed. She sat up instantly, fear slamming across her face. The doorknob twisted, slowly. Then a low voice, cracked and rasping through the door, said, "Hey!" Mira clapped her hand over her mouth to stop a scream. Goosebumps crawled up my spine. The handle rattled harder. Then footsteps walked away. I grabbed my phone and dialed emergency services, barely able to speak. The operator told us to stay where we were, stay quiet, wait for officers. The minutes dragged like hours. Every sound felt enormous. The hum of the heater, the ringing in my ears, the soft pressure of Mira shaking beside me. Finally, blue and red lights washed across the windows. Police searched the house, every corner, every room, every shadow. But he was gone. They found the back door cracked open. Snow tracked across the mat, footprints leading away into the dark. But the worst part was what they found in the crawl space. A filthy sleeping bag. Crushed food wrappers, water bottles. Scratched markings on the wooden beams, and a dark stain in the corner. He had been living there, not passing through. Living, watching, listening. The officer looked at me with a grim expression. "He has been here for days, maybe weeks," he said. "He knew your routines." Mira clung to me, trembling. We left that night for her cousin's place, sleeping with every light on. But the story didn't end there. After that incident, strange things kept happening in the neighborhood. A family down the street reported that every time they turned on their Christmas lights, someone knocked on their windows in slow, steady patterns. And when they turned the lights off, the knocking stopped immediately. Another family found wrapped gifts under their tree each morning, slipped into the house through the dog door, except they didn't own a dog. Inside the packages were small items like buttons, bottle caps, coins, and once a Polaroid photo of their living room taken while they were sleeping. And at the shelter where I sometimes volunteered, one of the new volunteers looked familiar until I saw a missing person poster in the hallway, his face circled in red. The name didn't match the one he gave us. No one saw him again after that day. I moved out of Grant's house the next month. I sold it without going back inside alone. I still wake some nights convinced I hear someone moving beneath floorboards, shuffling like they're waiting for the right moment to come up again. And sometimes, in that thin moment before dawn, I swear I hear a quiet knock on my window whenever the holiday lights are on, slow and patient, like someone checking if I'm still there. I never thought a winter job would twist my life into something I still wake up shaking from, but that December changed everything for me in ways I never understood until it was too late. I only share this because silence feels heavier than truth, and maybe someone out there needs to hear what I learned the hard way. Back then, I was working a temporary night shift job in a place called Frostline Park, a small winter amusement ground on the edge of a forgotten town named Riverpine. I had moved there after my old life fell apart in a single year, losing my job, my friends, and every bit of confidence I once had. My name is Mason, and that winter I was 22, broke, and living inside a tiny room above a laundromat that smelled like soap mixed with sadness. The pay at Frostline Park was awful, but it was the only job I could get. My task was simple on paper. I had to walk the grounds from evening to closing time, making sure no animals got in, no kids snuck past the gates, and no equipment broke in the cold. In reality, it was a lonely job, quiet enough for my own thoughts to grow teeth and bite me from the inside. The place looked cheerful during the day, with fake snow machines blowing little flakes of foam, lights shaped like candy canes wrapping around tall poles, and a frozen carousel that never played the same tune twice. But the charm vanished after dark, when the rides cast long shadows and the speakers crackled in the wind, playing old holiday songs, just slightly off-key. Something about the place felt wrong when the temperature dropped, like the shadows stretched too far or the wind carried whispers. My coworker, the night mechanic named Brady, told me on my first day that Frostline Park had a strange past. Years ago, someone went missing inside the maze trail behind the carousel, a winter attraction made of wooden walls painted white. People said the man walked in during snowfall and never walked out. No footprints, no disturbance, nothing but silence. I laughed it off at first, because rumors are built into every small town. But the way Brady said it made me uneasy, like he wasn't joking and wasn't looking for a reaction. For the first week, nothing strange happened. I walked my route, checked locks, denied a group of teens trying to sneak in after hours, and mostly kept to myself. The nights were long but manageable. Until the 9th day of December, when something shifted and turned the air colder than it should have been. Around 7:45 p.m., a package arrived at my small rented room. No return address, no name. Just an old-style brown box tied with red ribbon that looked hand-dyed. I thought maybe it was a late birthday gift or something sent to the wrong place. But when I opened it, my stomach turned cold. Inside were old printed photographs. Not pictures of random people, but photos of me sleeping, me curled under my blanket, me turned on my side with my mouth open. The oldest one looked like it was taken weeks ago. The newest one looked like it was taken that morning. Someone had been inside my room, standing over me, watching me. I didn't tell anyone, because what would they say? That maybe I took them myself? That maybe it was a prank? So I shoved them into my backpack and walked to work, trying to pretend the world wasn't folding in around me. The wind felt sharper that night, dragging empty candy wrappers across the ground like they were alive. At 8:20 p.m., I walked past the front gate and froze when I saw something that made my chest tighten. A group of carolers stood outside the fence, wearing old-fashioned Christmas clothes, singing a tune that didn't match their expressions. Their voices were sweet, but their faces were blank. Their eyes never blinked. They sang the same verse again and again, staring straight at me. I waved awkwardly, but none of them reacted. They just watched me as if waiting for something. I hurried inside, locking the gate behind me. The night stretched on slower than normal. Every shadow felt thicker, every sound too close. At 10:16 p.m., while checking the frozen swing ride, I noticed something sitting on the control panel. It was a small ornament shaped like a tiny glass cabin covered in frost. I didn't own anything like it. No one should have been inside the park but me and Brady. I picked it up to throw it away, but the moment my fingers brushed the glass, my arm tingled like electricity crawled across my skin. Someone knew where I worked. Someone had followed me here too. At 11 p.m., Brady came by, rubbing his hands together for warmth. He was in his 30s, calm, always smelling like engine oil and peppermint gum. He took one look at me and frowned. "You look like you saw something you shouldn't have." I wanted to tell him everything, but the words stuck to my throat. Instead, I followed him as he checked the generator behind the carousel. While he worked on fixing a loose wire, I kept scanning the area. The shadows between the wooden walls of the maze looked deeper than the night sky, like something inside them was breathing slow. We finished our shift without seeing anything obvious, but the air around us felt charged, heavy with something watching. When I got home at 2:17 a.m., an ornament was sitting on my bed frame, the same frosted cabin I had left behind at the park. Someone had followed me home in the dark, entered my room without sound, and placed it inches from my pillow. I threw it across the room. It hit the wall without breaking, as if it wasn't made of glass at all. The next night, things grew worse. At 7:10 p.m., as I walked toward the park entrance, the same group of carolers appeared again, standing in the exact same positions, singing the same song, eyes wide, unblinking. The moment I stepped closer, their singing stopped all at once, like someone cut the sound. Not one face moved, not one chest rose with breath. Only their eyes followed me as I pushed the gate open. Cold fear slid under my skin, but I forced myself inside. Inside the park, the wind picked up, dragging snow across the pavement like tiny white claws. The rides creaked even though they were turned off. The speakers crackled and played a tune I had never heard before, slow and broken, like a lullaby recorded underwater. At 9 p.m., we had our first real scare. A man walked into the park wearing a long winter coat and a hood pulled low, even though the gates were locked and no customers were allowed at night. I called out, telling him the park was closed, but he didn't answer. Instead, he stood near the frozen carousel and looked at me without speaking. When I moved toward him, he stepped back into the maze, disappearing behind a wall before I reached him. I followed for a moment, but the maze swallowed every sound. The cold grew sharper, the deeper I walked, and something in my bones begged me to turn around before I joined the man who went missing years ago. So I stepped out quickly, gasping for air that didn't taste right. At 10:42 p.m., Brady told me he had to check the boiler under the main lodge and would meet me in 30 minutes. I continued my rounds alone, flashlight shaking in my hand even though I pretended it was the cold. As I passed the snowfall stage, a chill crawled up my spine. A single child's shoe sat in the middle of the platform, the kind with glitter and a tiny bell on the strap. I backed away without touching it. Then my phone buzzed, a picture message. My heart cracked open when I saw it. It was a photo of me standing right there next to the stage, taken from behind. Someone was close enough to touch me, but I hadn't heard a single footstep. I spun around, shining the flashlight everywhere, calling Brady's name even though I knew it wasn't him. The wind answered instead, carrying a faint whisper that sounded like someone saying my name from far away. At 11:25 p.m., I found another ornament, this one shaped like a snowflake, hanging on the handle of the maintenance shed. I ripped it down, my fingers numb with fear. That's when I heard footsteps behind the shed, slow, dragging, like someone walking with a limp. I backed away, but something moved between the trees beyond the fence, a tall shape with its head tilted too far to one side. I ran. I sprinted toward the main lodge, expecting to find Brady, but when I pushed the door inside, the lights flickered wildly. The air smelled like cold metal and wet earth. I called out again, no answer. Only the distant rumble of the boiler far below. When I moved deeper inside, the hallway lights died one by one behind me, like something followed close, swallowing the glow as it came. My breath came out in sharp bursts. I heard the faint echo of singing, the same caroler's tune, drifting through the vents even though they were still outside. At 11:58 p.m., I reached the boiler room door and found it slightly open. I pushed it wider and stepped inside. The heat should have been unbearable, but the place felt freezing. The boilers weren't running. Tools lay scattered across the floor, one of them broken, and there, near the wall, was Brady's walkie-talkie crushed like someone stomped it. Before I could think, the light snapped off. Full darkness swallowed me. A soft dragging sound moved across the concrete, slow and steady, coming closer. I fumbled for my phone, turning the screen on, but the moment I held it up, a hand slapped it out of my grip from the dark. I stumbled backward, hitting metal pipes. The dragging grew louder, scraping like nails pulling against the floor. Then a whisper floated past my ear, too close to be imagination. It said a single word: "Found you." I bolted out of the room, slamming the door behind me. I ran through the hall, my heartbeat smashing against my ribs. The lodge doors burst open when I hit them, and I stumbled outside into the cold. But outside wasn't safety. The carolers had entered the park. They stood around the fountain, blocking the exit, singing their slow, broken song again, all their blank eyes locked on me. Their faces didn't change, didn't breathe, didn't blink. The man in the long winter coat stood behind them, hood lowered now, showing weather-beaten skin and a thin scar running from his mouth to his jaw. His stare felt like a hook digging into my chest. I tried to run the other direction, but he stepped forward, raising an ornament in his hand, a glass cabin like the first one. He crushed it effortlessly between his fingers. When the pieces fell, they didn't land as glass but as tiny white flakes, like snow made of bone. Everything inside me snapped and I tore across the park, racing toward the frozen maze. I didn't want to go inside it, but the man and the carolers moved too fast, closing in from all sides. I ducked into the first turn, trying to stay close to the entrance, but the moment I stepped forward, the walls behind me shifted. Not physically, but in some trick of the dark that made every corner look wrong. I turned left, then right again. No exit, no sounds, but distant singing growing louder. My breath shook harder than my hands. I tried climbing the wall, but it was too smooth, coated with thin ice that burned my palms. Then I heard footsteps inside the maze with me, not one person, but many. Some slow, some quick, some dragging. I whispered to myself to stay calm, but my voice didn't feel like mine anymore. At 12:16 a.m., I spotted a faint glow up ahead, like a small lamp. I ran toward it, desperate for any light. But when I reached it, my stomach twisted. It wasn't a lamp. It was a string of ornaments tied together, each one shaped like a snowflake or a cabin or a bell, each one carved with my name on the bottom. Someone had made these just for me. A soft voice whispered again, distant at first, then closer. "Found you." I sprinted again, turning every corner, slipping on ice, scraping my arm against a wooden wall. My lungs felt on fire. Footsteps followed from behind, heavy and uneven. I could hear breathing that didn't sound human. Something brushed past my coat, cold and sharp enough to tear fabric. I didn't look back. At 12:28 a.m., I spotted a sliver of moonlight cutting across the snow. I pushed through the final turn and burst out of the maze, collapsing to the ground. I scrambled to my feet and sprinted toward the outer fence. I didn't care if I cut myself climbing it. I just needed to get out. But when I reached it, the man in the winter coat stood there waiting, blocking the only exit. His eyes were dark and hollow, like looking into a tunnel with no end. Behind him, the carolers stood in a perfect line, faces blank, eyes dead, singing the same verse in cracked voices that echoed through the park. "You cannot run," he said quietly, like he had known me forever. I stumbled backward, shaking my head. "I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want." He stepped closer. He whispered, almost kindly, "You were never meant to wear someone else's place." I froze. Something clicked inside me. He didn't want me. He wanted the person who had this job before me. Whoever held this night shift position last winter. The one who quit suddenly. The one whose name I had never learned. The man raised his hand. Another ornament dangled from his fingers, shaped like a tiny person curled in sleep. He tilted his head. "Wrong one," he said softly. Then he let the ornament fall. The moment it hit the ground, the wind exploded into a roar, snow blasting across the park like a white storm wall. I covered my face, crouching low as a sharp ringing filled the air. When the storm faded seconds later, they were all gone. The man, the carolers, everything. The park stood empty and silent. I didn't wait. I climbed the fence, tearing my hands open on the metal, and ran through the snow-covered road until the park looked like a distant nightmare. I never went back. I never collected my last paycheck. I packed my things that night and left River Pine forever, but the story didn't end when I escaped. 3 weeks later, a new package arrived at my next apartment. No return name. No message. Only one item inside. A single ornament, shaped like a tiny frost-covered cabin. And on the bottom, carved into the glass with something sharp, was my name. I was 11 years old the winter my family drove out to Cold Harrow Valley, a forgotten town buried deep in the northern mountains where my mother's older cousin lived. We barely visited, maybe once every 3 or 4 years, and even as a kid I knew why. Her house felt wrong in a way I could never explain. It wasn't fear exactly, just a tight pull in my chest every time we turned onto that long dirt road lined with skeletal winter trees. The place felt like it remembered things no one talked about, but none of that mattered to me back then. It was Christmas Eve. The air smelled like burning pine. Snow blew across the road in twisting shapes that looked almost alive. My parents were arguing about which turn to take. My younger sister Lena kept tapping her boots against the back of my seat, and the radio faded in and out like the static was trying to speak. It felt like every holiday ride we had ever taken. Nothing special, nothing strange, just cold hands, loud voices, and too many layers of clothes. When we finally reached the house, an old 2-story place leaning slightly under the weight of years, the first thing I noticed was the silence. No wind, no scraping branches, no distant traffic, only the crunch of our tires through the deep snow. The porch light flickered like it might blink out forever. My dad laughed as he hauled our luggage out of the trunk. Looks like the kind of house that tells stories about the people who walk inside. Mom nudged him and told him to stop, but her voice shook the tiniest bit, as if she heard something in the house that we didn't. Nobody told me then, but we weren't supposed to spend the night. We only planned to drop off gifts, eat dinner, and head home. But Dad had drunk too much holiday wine, and Mom refused to drive through the storm. So we stayed. We never stayed anywhere overnight, not even with family. But that night, for the first and last time, we made an exception. Inside, the house felt too warm. Not cozy warm, but thick and heavy like the heat had been sealed in for years. The fire roared in the stone hearth, filling the room with the smell of burning cedar mixed with something sweet and sharp, almost metallic. My cousin Mira wasn't home, off visiting friends. It was just me, Lena, Mom, Dad, and our cousin's guardian, old Aunt Selma, who moved around like she was always listening for footsteps that didn't belong to her. We ate dinner, we laughed, we opened our Christmas Eve pajamas. Everything felt normal enough, but my eyes kept drifting to the narrow hallway leading to the back of the house. The shadows there never seemed still. Every time I glanced, they looked like they were shifting into shapes I didn't want to understand. Around 9:43 p.m., sleepiness crept over me like a soft blanket. I curled up on the couch under a red and gold Christmas throw. My parents were still talking. The fire crackled. For the first time that night, I felt calm, safe, warm. I didn't know I would soon wake up in a house that was no longer pretending to sleep. Sometime later, maybe midnight, maybe closer to 1:22 a.m., I woke for no reason, not a noise, not a touch. The air felt different, thick and unmoving, like the house itself had stopped breathing. Moonlight streamed through the window, cutting a sharp silver line across the floor. My blanket had slipped off my shoulder. My neck ached from sleeping at an angle. I rubbed my eyes and slowly lifted my head. 2 children were standing in the archway between the living room and dining room, a boy and a girl. Their faces pale as moon reflection on ice. They didn't move. They didn't make a sound. They stood like they had been frozen in place for a century, waiting for someone to wake up and notice them. The girl stood slightly in front, her head tilted to the right, as if listening to something only she could hear. The boy's hands moved a little, soft gestures like he was explaining something to her without words, but no sound traveled between them. The room was unbearably silent, like the world had been muted. At first, I didn't feel fear, just confusion. I thought they were real kids. Maybe Mira's friends, maybe someone who lived nearby. The house was old. Maybe the doors didn't always lock right. "Hey," I whispered, no reaction. "Hey, what are you doing up?" Nothing. Not a blink, not a twitch. Unease crawled up my spine like a cold spider. I reached for my mother and shook her arm. "Mom, where are the neighbor kids?" She woke only halfway, her voice low and tired. "Honey, there are no kids here. Do you hear me? Everyone else is asleep in the back rooms. Go back to sleep." My stomach dropped. A cold burn spread across my chest. Then who was standing there? I turned toward the doorway again. They were staring directly at me. Startled, their heads had snapped forward, their shoulders squared like soldiers waiting for a command. Their eyes held no shine, no life. They didn't blink. Not once. A voice inside me whispered, "Run," but my body wouldn't respond. My breath stuttered. My heartbeat felt loud enough to echo off the walls. I couldn't scream. I couldn't even lift my blanket. I just curled into myself, hiding my face as tears warmed my cheeks. I stayed like that for minutes, maybe 20, maybe 30, counting slowly, fighting the urge to sob, praying that whatever they were wouldn't move closer. Finally, I gathered the courage to peek. They were gone. The archway was empty. The moonlight was just moonlight again, soft and harmless. My throat wouldn't open to wake my parents. My voice felt locked behind fear. Eventually, exhausted from terror, I drifted into a thin, shaking sleep. Morning came with the smell of coffee and the sound of Christmas music. I convinced myself it was a dream. Kids imagine things. Shadows trick the eyes. Houses creak. I made myself believe it. I needed to believe it. Years passed before I told my mother what I saw. I was 16 when I finally said it aloud. "Mom, do you remember that Christmas at Cousin Selma's house?" Something happened that night. She froze. Slowly, she set down her mug. Her eyes did not leave mine. "What happened, Niall? Tell me exactly." I explained every detail. The moonlight, the stillness, the children, the silence, everything. She didn't smile. She didn't scoff. She didn't tell me I imagined it. She went pale. "I didn't want to scare you back then," she whispered, but Selma wasn't alone in that house. She used to hear footsteps in the hallway when no one was around. She would hear knocking on the attic door. She said sometimes she felt something sit on the end of her bed. Light, but heavy at the same time. I felt cold all over. Why didn't she tell us? Mom rubbed her arms like the memory chilled her. She didn't want anyone thinking she was losing her mind, but she always said whatever lived there felt young. Young, like the two children I saw. Mom sighed, her voice barely above a breath. She told me she'd see shadows sometimes too, two small shapes, side by side, standing in that hallway. Always standing, always watching, always watching. I felt my heartbeat in my throat, the same hallway where I saw them. Curiosity eventually got the better of me. I searched old records from Cold Harrow Valley. The house had been built in 1874. It had been owned by many families, but one family caught my attention. Two children, a boy and a girl, died in a fire during a blizzard. They died in the hallway outside the living room, right where I saw them. We visited the house one last time. I slept between my parents, too afraid to blink, let alone dream. But the house didn't care if I was afraid. That night, I saw a woman in my sleep, pale as ash, walking through the kitchen naked and shivering, covered in soot and frozen blood. She moved like she had been looking for someone she lost long ago. She did not see me, but she wasn't alone. Something trailed behind her, not footsteps, not breath, something soft and slow like dragging fabric across the floor. Maybe it was just a nightmare, maybe not. Selma moved out a year later. When I asked her why, she only said I needed something brighter. But her trembling hands told the truth. Something in that house had grown tired of being ignored. Something restless, something young, something hungry for attention. We were not the first people it watched, and we would not be the last. But Christmas is strange in small towns. People whisper about shadows on rooftops. Parents lock their chimneys. Stories circle about a delivery driver who kept seeing the same man following his truck for a week straight, scribbling down every address he went to. Kids open gifts early and find handwritten notes inside saying, "I know you are home alone." Families hear footsteps on their roofs long before Christmas morning, never realizing someone has been living in their attic for months. Cold Harrow Valley feeds on stories like these, and its houses remember every one of them. Sometimes, especially in winter, when the snow thickens and the wind dies and the world goes silent, I still wake up in the night. I still see that moonlit line across the floor, and I always wonder if I look toward the doorway, will they be there again, standing quietly, waiting for me to notice them? Maybe they never left me. Maybe I never left them. Maybe on that cold Christmas Eve, I did not wake them up. Maybe they woke me. I was 9 the winter my childhood died. Not 9 and fearless, not 9 and innocent, but 9 and desperate to believe that Christmas was still magic. My name is Kaysen, and I grew up in Frostline Ridge, a small frozen town buried under snow every December. People always said the cold kept us humble, and outsiders called our place peaceful, but I know better now. Peace is only quiet before something dark wakes up, and Frostline Ridge was full of quiet. My parents worked simple jobs. My mother cleaned cabins for visiting families, and my father worked nights at the lumberyard. I was an only child, lonely enough to cling to stories, especially stories about Santa, because they made the world feel kind. Every Christmas Eve, I waited at my window, hoping to see something magical in the sky. I never expected to see something monstrous across the street instead. We had moved to our new home only a few months before, a narrow green house on Glacier Bend Road. I liked the color because it reminded me of pine trees, but my father always said the walls were thin enough to hear a cough from across the block. He was right. I could hear everything in that house, but nothing bothered me until I noticed the family living opposite us. Their name was the Dalwins. I did not know that at first. I only learned it because one morning my father opened our mailbox and grumbled that the mailman mixed up our letters again, then muttered the name under his breath while pushing the envelopes into the slot. After that, they were simply the people across the road, quiet and pale and strange. The husband was tall and wide-shouldered, walking like his boots were too tight. The wife had dark, thick hair tied low on her neck, and she always looked tired. I barely saw them, and I never thought about them until Christmas Eve. That evening, my mother made hot chocolate with so many marshmallows it felt like drinking sweet clouds. My father complained about the electricity bill when he plugged in our lights, pretending he hated Christmas even though he secretly loved everything about it. And I did what I always did. I went to my room, pressed my forehead to the cold window, and stared at the sky. I whispered for Santa to hurry because I was getting older and I needed one last miracle. The snow outside glowed under the street lamp. The rooftops were covered in white. It should have been peaceful. But when I looked across the road, I noticed the Dalwins' upper window lit by a soft blue glow. Their curtains were open just enough for me to see a shape on the bed, someone curled under a blanket while the television flickered. I was not trying to spy. I was just a lonely kid looking for magic, but the glow from that room burned into my mind long before I understood why. It was around 7:46 p.m. I remember because I kept glancing at the red digits on my clock, afraid I might fall asleep if I blinked too long. The blanket across the street moved softly, like someone shifting under it. Everything looked safe, quiet, almost comforting. Then I saw a figure step into the room. At first, I thought nothing of it, just a shadow crossing in front of the television. But then the tall man approached the bed with stiff movements, and something about how he walked made my stomach twist. He did not lean over gently. He did not speak. He did not do anything that a tired husband might do. The first downward motion was so fast that my eyes could not understand it. His arm rose and fell in harsh, sharp movements. The blanket jerked again and again. The man leaned forward with a strange, tight focus, like he was working on something heavy. His face flashed in the blue light for half a heartbeat, and I felt my chest freeze. Nothing about his expression looked human. I was 9. I did not know what real violence looked like, but I knew this was wrong. I whispered for my mother, but my feet would not move. I felt stuck to the floor, stuck to the window, stuck to the moment. Another strike. Another. The movements were cold and steady, like he had done this before. When the blanket finally stopped shaking, a strange silence settled inside my head. I backed away so fast that I tripped on one of my toy trains and landed hard. That broke whatever spell I was under, and I ran. I crashed into the living room, breath shaking, words spilling out of me without meaning. My mother shot upright on the sofa, and my father set down his eggnog so fast the cup almost fell. I told them everything, the movements, the window, the woman who did not move. My mother pressed a hand to her chest. My father tried to stay calm, asking again and again if I was sure, if I might have imagined it, if maybe the man was just trying to wake her up. But I knew what I saw. My parents began whispering to each other, then arguing. My mother said to call the police. My father said we could get in trouble if it was not real. My mother said she did not care. My father said he did. She snapped at him, and that ended things quick. My father called the police. After that, everything became blurry. Officers arrived. Flashlights shined. They knocked on the Dalwins' door. No one answered. Then they ordered the man to come outside with his hands up. I was shaking so badly that my mother made me put on my boots because she said the street was being evacuated, just in case. We ran through the snow while red and blue lights flashed behind us, and the cold air stung my cheeks. My father muttered that he hoped this was all a mistake, a misunderstanding, anything but the truth. We did not return home until early morning. The neighborhood looked empty and broken. Yellow tape fluttered in the wind. Fresh boot prints marked the untouched snow. The Dalwins' house was silent. My father spoke with an officer while my mother kept me in the car, but I could hear pieces of the conversation. Words like knife, injuries, self-inflicted, and deceased. My mother whispered, "Oh no," again and again, like a prayer she forgot the ending to. When my father opened the car door, his face looked drained, like someone had pulled the life out of him. He said the neighbor woman was gone. He said she had been stabbed many times. He said the man ended his own life when police entered. He said I saw too much. I stared at my hands. I whispered that she never moved after the last hit. My mother began crying. My father rubbed his eyes, but I did not say another word. Not on the drive home, not the next day, not for a week. Fear settled inside me like slow ice. It did not scream, it did not cry. It simply stayed. After that night, I changed. I stopped trusting the dark. I stopped trusting people. I studied everyone, watching for danger the way animals listen for rustling in the grass. Every Christmas light reminded me of that flickering television. Every snowy night reminded me of that window. But I thought that was the end. I was wrong. Years passed. I became older, careful, quiet. I worked nights at a delivery station, sorting boxes for extra money. My name was forgotten by most people. I liked it that way. But every December, something in the air would make me remember the blue glow of the Dalwins' room. Then last Christmas, something new happened. I came home from holiday shopping and found a wreath hanging on my door. I did not buy a wreath. I could not afford one. The ribbon tied around it looked familiar, and when I leaned closer, my stomach dropped. The ribbon was made of my missing shoelaces. A cold wind brushed my neck. That night, I locked all the doors, but I could not sleep. Around 2:17 a.m., I heard a soft clicking noise near my living room. When I went to check, I found a Polaroid picture on my floor. It showed my Christmas tree, a picture taken from inside my house. The next night, I found another Polaroid taken from a different angle. The third night, another. Someone was entering without sound, without leaving prints, without fear. I remembered the Darwin's window. I remembered the man's stiff walk. I remembered the silence. Something told me I was not alone anymore. A few days later, during a snowstorm, someone knocked on my door. When I opened it, a man in a Santa suit stood there. His beard looked crooked. His eyes looked wrong. He said he spoke to my wife on the phone, and she told him to stop by for a gift drop-off. I told him I did not have a wife. He smiled like he already knew that. That night, when the wind was howling and the lights flickered, I sat by my window again. I felt like I was 9 again, waiting for Santa, but this time the magic was gone. This time I knew the truth. People hide things. Houses hide things. Winter hides things. I stared across the street the way I had all those years ago, and in the mirror of the glass I saw movement behind me. A tall silhouette, a slow, stiff walk. A blue flicker like a television light, except my television was off. Fear filled my stomach again, the same cold, creeping fear that never really left me. I did not turn around. I did not breathe. I simply watched the reflection move closer, step by step, until it stood near my shoulder. Sometimes I think that night never ended. Sometimes I think I am still staring out that window, still trapped in the moment the world taught me what darkness looks like. I learned something on that old Christmas Eve, and the lesson stayed with me forever. You never truly know your neighbors. You never truly know who watches you. And the worst monsters do not need costumes or claws or fangs. They just need a winter night, a locked door, and a moment when you stop looking. I always believed winter hid secrets under the snow, but I never knew how dark those secrets could be until the Christmas, when everything shifted inside my life forever. I still remember how my family worked so hard to cover the real truth, stitching lies like patches across the world so I would not slip through the cracks. Back then I was just a kid, old enough to understand Santa was pretend, but still young enough to wish he were real when nights felt too cold or too silent. We lived on the far edge of a small northern town called Brimwood, a place where frozen winds chewed at old houses and people kept to themselves a little too carefully. Some parts of Brimwood were rough, loud arguments echoing between cracked walls, broken streetlights humming with dying bulbs, shadowy figures passing corners without names. It was home, even if the town seemed ready to swallow anyone not paying attention. Our house was a worn-down rental on a crooked hill, with thin walls that let every wind whisper through, a basement that felt older than the earth, and a furnace that clanged like metal bones. Every Christmas Eve, my siblings and I slept downstairs so our parents could set up gifts without us seeing. We always pretended we believed the gifts came from the North Pole, even though deep inside we knew the truth. The basement turned into its own world those nights, a space sealed off from the cold above. My siblings, Milo, Kiera, and Tiny June, were already curled in their sleeping bags when I walked down the creaking steps that year. Mom had wrapped battery lights around the pipes and beams, giving the basement a soft winter glow. The air smelled like cinnamon rolls she baked earlier mixed with the dusty carpet we never could clean. Kiera laughed as I joined them, teasing the way older sisters do, saying, "I took longer brushing my teeth than Grandpa took telling stories." I tossed my pillow at her. She ducked. It hit Milo instead, and everyone giggled. Dad poked his head down the stairs with that warm but tired smile he always wore on holidays, telling us not to sneak upstairs, not to touch anything, and if we heard weird noises, it was just the house settling or raccoons running over the roof. June squealed at the mention of raccoons, and Dad laughed, promising he was only joking. It was a tradition, the same words every year, holding our childhood in place for just a little longer. I settled near the clunky furnace, pulling my blanket up to my chin as we argued about which Christmas movie was best, then moved on to guessing our gifts. Everything felt calm until we heard a noise. At first it was a dull thud, faint enough to ignore, then another. Then a muffled shout slipping through the snow-wrapped basement windows, those tiny rectangles half buried under icy banks. I tried to brush it off, telling everyone it was probably someone leaving Pineside Tavern, the bar down the road where folks got loud during holidays. But then came a sharper sound, like metal scraping pavement. Kira sat up, asking if that sounded right for drunk people. Milo removed his headphones with wide eyes, asking what was happening. Before I answered, the basement door opened, and Mom hurried down, pale and shaking like she had seen something she wished she hadn't. She told us to stay downstairs no matter what we heard. I asked what was going on, but she only shook her head, kissed each of us, and rushed up again, shutting and locking the door. We fell silent, fear spreading through the room like frost creeping over glass. More noises came, louder this time. Engines screeching, men yelling, something sharp and ragged in the distance that might have been a scream, or the icy wind twisting through Brimwood's narrow streets. Milo whispered if we should look, but I told him no, even though my heart drummed hard enough to shake my ribs. Time stretched thin. Maybe 1 minute passed, maybe 10. Then sirens howled through the night, shaking the windows. Red and blue lights flashed through snow stuck against the glass, casting broken colors across the basement like twisted Christmas lights. We tried to pretend it was nothing, maybe a car crash, but our voices sounded hollow. We huddled together, warmth mixing with fear. The sirens faded, replaced by radio chatter, boots stomping on icy ground, more shouting from somewhere close. Then footsteps climbed the stairs, heavy ones, different from Mom's soft rush or Dad's usual slow step. The door creaked open and all four of us held our breath. Dad stepped down first with a smile that looked wrong, stretched too wide, and behind him came Santa Claus. A full red suit, snowy beard, glasses slipping down his nose, boots coated with fresh snow. My youngest sister gasped in joy. Milo whispered, "No way," and even I felt something spark in my chest. A strange return of a childhood I thought was gone. Santa spoke in a warm, deep voice, greeting us, but something about his tone felt slightly unfamiliar, like a song played on the wrong instrument. But I didn't dwell on it, because magic, even borrowed magic, is easy to accept when you're scared. Santa stepped carefully through the pipes and ducts, saying he heard some good children were here, and his sleigh got stuck in a snowbank outside, so he came in while police helped him out. I repeated the word police quietly, and he nodded kindly, telling us they were good folks. Then he reached inside his sack and pulled out presents wrapped in plain brown paper. Nothing like Mom's careful wrapping, but each one had our names written neatly. He said it was magic, tapping his nose. We opened them. I got a sketch pad, something I had actually wished for. Milo got new earbuds. Kiara received a silver charm necklace. June hugged a stuffed reindeer tightly. We sang a bit, we laughed, though Santa kept glancing at the stairs like he was listening for something above. He stayed maybe 15 minutes, then told us he needed to go back to work. He hugged each of us before walking upstairs behind Dad. The door shut. We heard some faint talking, the front door opening, then nothing. Eventually, we fell asleep, still wrapped in the strange glow of the moment. Christmas morning was perfect. Mom and Dad acted normal, cooking breakfast, handing out cocoa, smiling like nothing strange had happened. That night felt like a dream, something fragile and magical, something I never questioned again for years. But 12 years later, everything cracked open. I was older, working as a junior carpenter in another town, visiting home for the holidays. Dad and I sat drinking around 7:45 p.m., the living room warm and glowing. I mentioned that strange Christmas when Santa came into our basement. Dad went quiet, staring into his drink. Then he finally said I was old enough to know. He told me what happened that night. A violent street fight had exploded 3 houses down. Not some fist fight, but something brutal. Knives flashing, pipes swinging, bats cracking against bone, people screaming in the winter dark. 3 men died before police arrived. Mom had come downstairs so we would not hear or see the horror. Dad had gone outside because someone tried climbing into our yard. And Santa, well, Santa was not an actor or some stranger. He was Mr. Carter, the retired bus driver who lived 2 streets over, a gentle man who always helped at winter food drives. He saw the violence, saw Mom panicking, saw police swarming the neighborhood. He wanted to protect the children nearby from fear, so he grabbed an old Santa suit from his attic, marched through the snow, and offered to help distract us. He created one beautiful memory while darkness tore apart the street. Dad's voice cracked as he told me, I asked why they never shared the truth. He said we deserved one Christmas memory unstained by cruelty. I thought about it for days. Later that winter, Mr. Carter passed away from heart trouble, and I stood quietly over his casket longer than I should have, remembering how he carried warmth into our basement while outside the world froze around violence. But this is where the story you know ends, and where the horror I lived begins. Because 12 years later, during that same visit home, something returned to Brimwood, something that made me question whether Mr. Carter had truly been the only Santa who ever walked into our basement. It started when I booked an Airbnb cabin outside Brimwood for a couple days, needing space from family memories. The cabin was charming, small, decorated for Christmas, but something felt off from the moment I stepped in. The host had hung glass ornaments everywhere, big round ones, almost too shiny. That first night I noticed tiny reflections moving inside them, like small blinking lights, but there were no lights near them. When I leaned closer, I saw a dark pinhole on each ornament. Cameras, hidden inside Christmas decorations. I felt sick. Someone had been watching guests. Watching me. I texted the host, but no answer came. Instead, I got a message from an unknown number saying, "Your Christmas gift is outside." My heart thudded. I opened the door slowly. Snow blew in cold waves. No gift, but muddy footprints led from the door into my cabin, stopping right behind where I stood. Something had gone inside, not outside. I slammed the door shut and locked everything. The power flickered. Something scratched the roof. I told myself it was an animal, but then I saw boot prints in the snow outside the bedroom window, large prints from heavy boots leading right up to the glass. They hadn't been there earlier. The next night, the prints returned, closer to the window each time. Someone was watching me. Someone wearing boots like Santa had worn that night long ago. I hardly slept. Every sound felt like breathing behind the walls. Every shadow seemed to lean toward me. Around 2:17 a.m., I woke to the softest tapping on the glass, slow, curious, like a finger tracing the window. When I looked, the boot prints were so close they pressed the snow against the wall. I fled back to my parents' house at dawn, but safety didn't come. The same day, Dad asked me to check the basement for old decorations. I went downstairs, and the past fell over me like a heavy blanket. The lights, the furnace, the cold air, everything was the same. I walked to the far wall and saw something that made my breath freeze. A boot print. A fresh one. A fresh one. In the same spot Santa once stood. I told myself it was dirt from our shoes. But then I saw more prints forming a trail toward the basement window. Outside the window, in the snow, someone had brushed away the drifts to make a path leading directly to the glass from the street. A path like someone wanted to look in again after all these years. That night, around 10:39 p.m., a knock echoed through the house. 3 slow knocks, spaced apart like someone savored the sound. Dad opened the door, then froze. I looked past him. A man stood there in a Santa suit, but not like Mr. Carter's soft, friendly costume. This one looked weathered, stained in dark places, snow frozen into the fur trim. His beard was tangled, his eyes too bright, too sharp. He said nothing. He only lifted his hand and pointed toward me. Dad stepped in front, telling him he had the wrong house, but the man kept pointing. Then he turned and walked away slowly, leaving prints deep in the snow. Prints matching the ones by my window. We called the police. They searched, found nothing. They said someone probably pranked us, but I knew better. That Santa had followed me from the cabin. He had followed the cameras. He had followed the footprints I ignored. Something old and hungry had worn the suit. That same night, replaying everything, I thought about Mr. Carter and the way he kept looking at the stairs all those years ago, like he was listening for someone else. Someone who might have been in the house. Someone who might have followed him. Someone who might have been watching children through those small basement windows. Then it hit me. There were 2 sets of prints that night long ago, one from Santa who protected us. One from something else climbing up toward our yard, the thing Dad thought he heard. Something that never left Brimwood. Now every Christmas, I see the prints again. Under windows, on rooftops, on porches, sometimes with mud, sometimes with ash. Always from boots too large to be normal. Someone or something tracks me, waiting, watching. And I know one winter it will stop knocking and simply walk inside like it always wanted to. This Christmas, as I write this, I hear snow crunching outside my window. Slow, careful, boot prints. I never imagined winter could cling to a person like a shadow, pressing itself into the mind so deeply that years later, it still wakes me from sleep. I learned that cold is not just weather, it can be something that follows you. I was a few weeks away from turning 40 when everything happened. Back then, I still believed stubbornness could solve anything, still convinced age was something that happened to other people. Anyone who knew me would have said I was the kind of man who never asks for help, the kind who bikes long miles through storms just to prove I could. Maybe they were right. My name is Marcus Nail, but everyone calls me Mark, unless my wife is annoyed. Then she says my full name like she is handing out punishment. That December, our home in Hollow Creek, Montana, was covered in cheap blinking lights I kept meaning to replace for 5 years. Lights that flickered like they were trying to speak in code. We were not rich, not adventurous, just simple people living simple lives, and I used to believe simple meant safe. I had no idea how close I was to the moment that would tear that belief apart. I had no idea something cold would notice me that night and refuse to let go. I finished a long day at work, the kind where the heater barely worked, the kind where everyone pretended they were not freezing. I climbed onto my old blue bicycle and started pedaling toward the gym like I always did. A person can get addicted to routine without realizing it. The sky was gray and slow flakes drifted down, and by the time I finished my workout, the clouds were a watery mess spilling icy rain. My chest felt tight from the cold air, but I told myself it was nothing. On the way home, a teenager shouted that I looked like winter had punched me. I yelled back something dumb just to feel tough. When I got home, soaked and shaking, my wife Lena was putting on a coat and earrings, staring into the hallway mirror. She teased me about looking like a drowned squirrel, and I teased her back, leaning my bike against the wall and making a puddle on the floor. She said she was going to the movies with her sister and asked if I would be okay alone. I waved her off like always, pretending I was 20 and strong. She reminded me she had left warm chicken in the fridge. I told her I was a grown man, not a child. She gave me that look all wives learn. I sighed and agreed. The door clicked shut and the house became still. I ate standing at the kitchen counter, like I usually did, not tasting much. Nothing dramatic happened at first. Just a strange, dull pressure under my chest, like someone pressing a fist slowly into me. I waited for it to pass. I drank water. I told myself it was heartburn, but the pressure spread, moving into my shoulder, then crawling down my left arm. A tingling feeling crept into my fingers. My mind made excuses. Too much food, cold air, maybe bad posture, but then the pressure sharpened, turning into a tight, crushing pain that stole my breath. My knees trembled. Something cold wrapped around my spine. I told myself it was nothing, but fear was already blooming inside me. My left arm went numb like someone had switched it off. I grabbed the phone with shaking hands and tried to stay calm. I dialed emergency help. The woman on the line kept her voice steady and calm. She asked questions. I tried to answer. She told me to stay with her, to keep breathing, that help was coming. I remember telling her my name, or trying to. I remember thinking I needed to call Lena. I tried, and she answered while standing in line for popcorn. When I told her something was wrong with my heart, her voice broke. She said she was coming home right away. The last thing I remember before the EMTs burst through the door was leaning against the sofa while the room twisted like melting glass. A medic named Rowan told me to keep my eyes open. He told me not to fade. But the world dimmed around me, shrinking like a candle flame being pinched out. Then, nothing. I did not feel myself fall. I did not feel pain. 1 second I was in my living room, the next I was standing on a snow-covered road. Snowflakes hung in the air, not falling, just frozen like someone had paused time. My breath did not fog. The sky was quiet, too quiet, too quiet. Behind me, Soft footsteps crunched through the snow. I turned and saw a figure maybe 40 feet away, shaped like a man but wrong in ways I could not understand. The coat it wore was old and torn, and its head tilted like it was studying me. I tried to call out. The sound went nowhere. Its hand lifted slowly. The fingers were too long, bending in places they should not bend. It curled its hand in a beckoning motion that made my whole body go cold. Then a voice called my name. I turned and saw EMT Rowan kneeling over my body, shouting for the others to shock me. A bright flash hit my chest. The snow world shattered like breaking glass. I gasped back into life, the hospital lights blurring overhead. Rowan leaned close and said I had gone into a dangerous rhythm. He told me I had flatlined. I could hear my wife crying behind him. They pushed me onto the stretcher. I felt like drifting away again, and once more I heard a whisper under all the noise. A quiet voice saying, "Not yet." I jerked, asking if someone else had spoken. Rowan shook his head. At the hospital, they rushed me into the cardiac unit. The machines beeped wild warnings. Nurses shouted readings. Someone said my artery was almost fully blocked. My heart hammered, then slowed, then hammered again. The world slid sideways and then fell away. I was back on the frozen road. Same silent air, same frozen flakes. Same figure, now closer. I could see its pale face stretched too tight across sharp bones, its eyes sunk deep like empty pockets. I begged it to stay away, but it tilted its head again, confused, curious, terrible. Its voice sounded like ice snapping on a frozen lake. It said I was warm, but close to cold. Then another shock struck my chest in the real world, and I snapped back, screaming, tears sliding down my face. Nurses held me still. They told me I was safe. But they were wrong. I flatlined 2 more times. Each time I returned to that road, each time the figure grew closer. On the 4th time, its fingertips brushed my wrist. A burning cold spread through me before the defibrillator ripped me away again. After emergency surgery, they inserted a stent and told me I had survived something most men my age never walk away from. They said I was lucky. But something had followed me. I stayed in the hospital for days. Machines beeped steady reminders that I was alive, but I felt watched. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard footsteps crunching in snow. The nurses said trauma could play tricks. Doctors said low oxygen caused hallucinations. But one night around 2:17 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my room. Slow. Heavy. Too deliberate. The door handle clicked. My heart twisted with fear while I whispered that no one should be there. But the door did not open. Instead, a voice slid under the crack, cold and whispering, telling me winter keeps what winter touches. I fainted. When I woke, they said no one had been in the hall, but the room temperature was near freezing. My breath fogged when I spoke. After a few weeks, I went home, still recovering. Lena tried making everything warm, cozy, festive. She lit candles, baked cookies, hung garlands. But the cold I brought back seeped into every room. The first night, frost crept across the bedroom window. Long, thin fingerprints formed on the glass. Too long, too many joints. I shook Lena awake and begged her to see. She said it was just frost. I said our dog does not have fingers. She brushed it off. Soon the fingerprints spread. Hallway mirror, shower glass. Car windshield, every surface colder than it should be, each set of prints closer, lower, as if crouching. We also noticed strange things happening around the neighborhood. Christmas candies left out for kids were replaced with little white pills, like someone wanted families to swallow something dangerous without noticing. Sections of Christmas lights were cut from different houses and placed in patterns on one neighbor's lawn, forming shapes that looked like twisted snowflakes or runes. Another neighbor's wreath vanished every night and returned with something disturbing inside. A stray key, a pair of scissors, strands of someone's hair. No one could explain it, but I knew winter was searching. The next Christmas Eve, a year after my heart attack, our family gathered for dinner. Kids laughed. Music played. Warm light filled the house. I almost believed I was fine. Then something icy touched my wrist. I dropped the tray I was carrying. Glass shattered. Everyone stared. A pale frostbite mark formed on my skin where the figure had touched me before. I whispered that the cold thing was back. People thought I was losing my mind. Then the front door creaked open even though it was locked. A freezing gust swept through. Candles died. The room darkened. Everyone's breath turned to fog. Crunching footsteps entered the house. My nephew whispered that someone was in the hallway. I whispered back that something was in the hallway. A tall, dim shape stepped into view, like smoke trapped inside ice. Its voice slid across the room, saying I had left the road too soon. It ignored everyone else. It looked only at me. I backed up. My chest tightened. The same crushing feeling returned. I felt myself slipping away, falling into that frozen world again. But Lena wrapped her arms around me from behind, screaming for me to stay. Her warmth pulled me back. The creature hissed like ice cracking, furious. It said I would return when winter called. Then it vanished. Heat returned. Lights brightened. But the cold in my bones stayed. And every Christmas Eve, just past midnight, I hear it outside my window. Crunch. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Waiting for me to fall asleep. Waiting for me to slip back onto that road of frozen time. Waiting to claim what it thinks is already its. I know one day it will touch my wrist again. And when it does, I do not think I will wake.